When HOA Karen poured soda into my disabled daughter's ventilator, she thought she'd escape justice until my security cameras caught her, and now she's facing federal charges. Yeah, you read that right. This isn't just a petty squabble over lawn ornaments or mailbox colors, it's a tale of betrayal so brazen it could only happen in the manicured jungles of suburbia. I'm a single dad from suburban Austin, Texas, pouring every ounce of grit into protecting my 12-year-old daughter, Emily, who battles a rare respiratory condition with the help of a ventilator. Picture this, a modest home on the edge of Austin's sprawling cookie-cutter neighborhoods, a place I picked for its quiet streets and distance from meddling oversight. It's not even under the jurisdiction of the local homeowners association, a fact you'd think would keep the clipboard crusaders at bay. But no, enter Karen Mitchell, the self-crowned queen of the HOA, a woman who struts through cul-de-sacs like she's ruling a medieval fiefdom. Her rulebook is her scepter, her certified letters are her decrees, and her smile. Pure predator, all teeth and zero warmth. She's the type to slap a fine on you for a shrub that's half an inch too tall, even if your yard isn't technically her kingdom. Neighbors mutter her name like she's a suburban bogeyman, feared for her knack of turning minor infractions into personal vendettas. Karen's obsession with control isn't just annoying, it's a menace. I've dodged her petty jabs before, like snide remarks about my truck's parking spot or glares over a trash can left out for an extra hour. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment she escalated from nuisance to outright danger. Emily's ventilator isn't some optional gadget, it's her lifeline, the machine that keeps her breathing when her body can't do it alone. Every hum of that device is a reminder of how fragile yet fierce her fight is. So when Karen decided to cross a line no sane person would dare, targeting that very lifeline in the dead of night, she didn't just poke the bear, she unleashed a storm. Lucky for me, I've got security cameras rigged around my property, a little insurance policy after past HOA nonsense. Those lenses caught every damning second of her act, and now they're the cornerstone of a battle she won't walk away from. Let me paint a clearer picture of why this hits so hard. Emily isn't just a kid with a medical condition, she's a force of nature packed into a small frame. Despite the tubes and machines, she's got a laugh that can light up the darkest day and a mind sharper than most adults I know. I spend my days under car hoods, wrench in hand, fixing engines to keep the bills paid, but my real work is at home, making sure her world stays steady. Our little house, tucked away from the HOA's official reach, was supposed to be a sanctuary. I figured we'd fly under the radar, just another family minding our own business. But Karen doesn't do live and let live. She's got a nose for sniffing out anything she can weaponize, and somehow, we ended up on her hit list. Her reign of terror over the neighborhood is legendary. Think less, community leader, and more, petty tyrant with a power trip. She's the kind of person who'd fine you for breathing too loudly if she could figure out how to codify it. And while I've managed to sidestep most of her nonsense, this latest stunt of hers isn't something I can ignore. This isn't just about one overzealous neighbor with a grudge. It's about a father's fight to shield his child from someone who values rules over a life. Karen thought she could sabotage Emily's ventilator and slink away into the night, no consequences, no accountability. She didn't count on my cameras, didn't count on me refusing to back down. What she did, thinking no one would see, has turned a quiet mechanic into a man with a mission. Those recordings aren't just evidence, they're the key to a legal showdown that could see her facing more than just a slap on the wrist. Federal charges aren't a game, and I'm not playing. I've spent years navigating her petty fines and snarky notices, but this time, she's gone beyond harassment into something criminal, something personal. The absurdity of it all would be laughable if it weren't so infuriating. An HOA busybody so obsessed with control that she'd risk a child's life over some imagined slight. It's the kind of story you'd think was ripped from a bad sitcom, except the stakes are real, and the pain cuts deep. But here's where the tide turns, with every frame of that footage, I've got the upper hand. This isn't just a neighborhood spat anymore, it's a fight for justice, a chance to topple a suburban dictator who's ruled with an iron fist for too long. And trust me, I'm not stopping until she answers for what she's done. So, buckle up for a ride through betrayal, sabotage, and the kind of comeback that makes petty tyrants sweat. This is the story of how one dad, fueled by love for his kid and backed by a few well-placed cameras, takes on the most insufferable HOA queen in Austin. It's got twists, it's got outrage, and yeah, maybe a few laughs at the sheer ridiculousness of Karen's audacity. If I don't find some humor in this mess, I might just lose it. Stick around to watch her reign of terror unravel, and while you're at it, hit me with your own HOA horror stories or neighbor nightmares in the comments. I could use the solidarity, and I'm betting you've got some gems. Let's commiserate over the Karens of the world and cheer for the day they finally get what's coming. I've always believed that family comes first, no matter the cost. Emily's every breath is a victory, and I'll be damned if I let someone like Karen steal that from us. Our home might be modest, our battles might be quiet, but this fight, it's loud, it's public, and it's personal. The cameras saw it all, the law's on my side, and the neighborhood's watching. Karen Mitchell picked the wrong dad to mess with, and I'm ready to prove it. Keep reading, because this is only the beginning of how a single act of malice turns into her biggest mistake. It all began with a shed that sparked Karen's wrath. Not just any shed, mind you, but a humble little structure in the backyard, pieced together with sweat and nails to store the overflow of Emily's medical gear, spare ventilator parts, oxygen tanks, and a tangle of tubing that could rival a plumber's inventory. It's not a work of art, just a practical box, because life-saving equipment doesn't exactly tuck neatly into a broom closet. But to Karen Mitchell, the iron-fisted president of the local HOA and self-proclaimed guardian of suburban perfection, that shed was a glaring middle finger to her vision of neighborhood harmony. Never mind that my property isn't even under her precious jurisdiction, she saw it as a personal insult, a blemish on her pristine domain that demanded immediate eradication. Life around here orbits one priority: keeping Emily safe and smiling. At 12 years old, she's a dynamo, a kid who refuses to let a rare respiratory condition define her. Despite being tethered to a ventilator most of the time, her spirit could outmuscle the toughest engine I've ever wrestled at the shop. Her paintings of the Texas Hill Country are the kind that stop you in your tracks, bursts of color and life that could hang in a gallery. And when she's not wielding a brush, she's hunched over a laptop, teaching herself to code like she's got her sights set on Silicon Valley, or maybe just hacking into my ancient computer to mess with me. My role in this duo is simpler but relentless: keep the bills paid, the medical gear running, and her world steady. Days are spent under car hoods, grease under my nails, while nights are for double-checking every hum of that ventilator. It's a grind, but there's no other fight I'd rather take on. Our home sits on the fringe of Austin's suburban sprawl, a modest spot chosen for its quiet and affordability, deliberately outside the HOA's official grip. Or so I thought. Karen and her band of rulebook zealots don't seem to grasp the concept of boundaries when it comes to their crusade for conformity. They've got an uncanny talent for meddling, whether it's a stern note about a lawn not being the exact shade of emerald they deem acceptable, or a glare that could curdle milk if a kid's bike lingers too long on a sidewalk. Karen leads this petty brigade with a fervor that's almost admirable if it weren't so infuriating. She's the kind of person who'd probably draft a fine for the way the wind blows if she could pin it on someone. Her obsession with control turns every minor detail into a battlefield, and somehow, we ended up in her crosshairs. So, back to that shed. One crisp spring morning in 2025, a certified letter lands on my doorstep with the gravitas of a royal decree. It's from Karen, naturally, speaking for the HOA, demanding I tear down the unsightly structure, because it violates their sacred aesthetic standards. Aesthetic standards. For a shed on my own land, holding equipment that keeps Emily breathing. The letter even had the nerve to threaten daily fines of $100 if I didn't comply within a week. I read it twice, half convinced it was some elaborate prank, but there was her signature, all pompous loops and entitlement, staring back at me. I could practically hear her dictating it over a decaf latte, perched in her perfectly pruned backyard, plotting her next suburban conquest. The sheer audacity of targeting something so critical, so necessary, lit a fire under me that no amount of certified mail could douse. I'm no legal eagle, but I've done enough digging to know a thing or two about rights. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and the Federal Fair Housing Act, FFHA, are clear. HOAs are required to make reasonable accommodations for disabled residents, even if it means bending their oh-so-precious guidelines. A shed for medical storage? That's about as reasonable as requests get. So, I fired off a response, polite but unyielding, citing those laws, explaining why the shed is non-negotiable for Emily's care, and reminding them yet again that my property isn't under their control. I figured a dose of legal reality might cool their jets. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Karen's reply was a curt little note doubling down on the fines, as if federal protections were just pesky suggestions she could brush aside with a flick of her pen. Her arrogance wasn't just a nuisance, it was a gauntlet thrown down, daring me to push back. That's when I decided I wasn't playing her game by her rules anymore. Past run-ins with the HOA over nonsense like my truck in my own driveway or snarky comments about a wheelchair ramp, clashing with the neighborhood vibe had already worn my patience thin. I wasn't about to let them strong-arm me over something tied directly to Emily's health. So, I dipped into savings and rigged up security cameras around the property. Nothing high-tech, just a handful of lenses covering the front, back, and sides of the house. Call it overkill, or call it a hard-learned lesson after years of HOA harassment, but I wanted proof if Karen or her minions tried anything underhanded. Little did I know how soon those cameras would shift from precaution to weapon, capturing a betrayal far uglier than any fine or nastygram. This shed dispute wasn't just about a backyard box, it was the opening salvo in a war I didn't sign up for. Karen thought she could bully me into submission, piling on fines and pressure over a structure most folks wouldn't even glance at twice. But she miscalculated. I'm not just some guy who fixes cars, I'm a father who'd walk through fire for his kid. Messing with Emily's safety isn't a game, it's a line in the sand. And when you cross it, you're not just starting a fight, you're igniting something unstoppable. The shed might seem like a small hill to die on, but it's tied to everything that keeps us going. Karen's petty power trip was only the beginning, a spark that would soon flare into something she couldn't control. Looking back, I can almost laugh at the absurdity of it, a shed as the catalyst for chaos. But there's nothing funny about the stakes. Every day is a balancing act, ensuring Emily's world doesn't tip into crisis, and Karen's letter was a shove in the wrong direction. With those cameras in place, I felt a sliver of security, a way to document any further overreach. I didn't expect how critical they'd become, how they'd capture a moment that would turn this from a neighborhood annoyance into a full-blown reckoning. Stick around, because this battle over a backyard shed is just the prelude to a storm Karen never saw coming. Her rules might reign over her little HOA empire, but they don't hold sway here, not when it comes to protecting what matters most. Then came the night that nearly cost Emily her life. It was a still evening in spring 2025, the kind where the Texas air clings with the faint promise of summer heat. After tucking her into bed, her ventilator humming its steady, reassuring rhythm like a mechanical heartbeat, I was in the kitchen rinsing off the day's grime when a sound pierced the quiet, a choking gasp, raw and desperate. My heart seized as I dropped everything and sprinted to her room. There she was, my 12-year-old fighter, struggling for air, her face drained of color, small hands clawing at nothing as the machine sputtered and failed. Panic clawed at me, but instinct kicked in. I switched to the backup system with trembling hands, dialed 911, and prayed harder than I ever have, willing time to slow until help arrived. Every second felt like an eternity, each ragged breath of hers a knife to my chest. Hours of terror unfolded in the ER, a blur of white coats and beeping monitors, until the doctors finally stabilized her. But their findings turned my relief into something darker, something molten. Inside the ventilator's tubing, they discovered a sticky, sugary residue clogging the lines, a deliberate sabotage that caused the life-threatening malfunction. Soda. Someone had poured soda into the machine, transforming a lifeline into a death trap. The doctor's voice was grim as he delivered the verdict: this was no accident, no random glitch. It was intentional, a calculated act of malice. Sitting by her bedside, watching her chest rise and fall with the help of a temporary unit, the question burned in my mind: who could do this to a child, to my child? Fear gave way to a rage so deep it steadied me. Whoever did this wasn't just going to pay, they were going to regret ever crossing this line. Back home the next day, with Emily still under observation at the hospital, I turned to the one tool I knew could unravel this nightmare: the security cameras. I'd installed them after the shed fiasco with Karen and the HOA, a safeguard against their relentless harassment, and now they were my only shot at answers. Huddled over the laptop in the dim light of early morning, I pulled up the footage from midnight, the timestamp just before the ventilator failed. My breath caught as the grainy glow of the backyard floodlight revealed a figure sneaking onto my property, moving with the skulking caution of someone who knows they're doing wrong. It was Karen Mitchell, her face unmistakable even in the low resolution, that smug sneer I'd seen at a dozen HOA meetings, now twisted with intent. In her hand, a can of soda, tilted deliberately into the ventilator's intake port as she glanced around to ensure no one was watching. My stomach churned with a mix of disgust and fury. Karen thought she was clever, but my cameras caught her sweeter than soda crime in full, damning detail. I played the footage again, then a third time, half hoping I'd misseen it, that this was some trick of the light or a nightmare I'd wake from. But no, there she was, clear as the rage boiling in me, tampering with the very device that keeps Emily alive. This wasn't just a petty HOA power play anymore, it was criminal, a direct assault on my daughter's existence. I backed up the video to a secure drive, knowing it would be the linchpin of justice. Security camera evidence like this is often admissible in court, carrying heavy weight in vandalism cases, and I wasn't about to let a single frame slip through my fingers. That morning, I called the police, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I showed them the recording, walked them through Emily's condition, and watched their expressions harden as the gravity of Karen's act sank in. They filed charges on the spot: property damage, endangerment, and violations of disability rights laws. Tampering with medical equipment isn't just a local offense; in cases this severe, it can escalate to federal consequences, and I intended to push for every penalty the law allowed. But I wasn't stopping at a police report. Karen's actions weren't just a personal attack, they were enabled by an HOA that let her run wild, ignoring the protections we're entitled to under the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and the Federal Fair Housing Act, FFHA. I reached out to a lawyer, Tom Reynolds, a no-nonsense guy with a track record of taking on petty tyrants. He watched the footage in my cramped home office, shaking his head as the video looped. "This isn't just a violation," he muttered, "it's a vendetta." Together, we started building a case to sue the HOA for negligence, for failing to rein in their president, for turning a blind eye to harassment that culminated in a near-fatal act. Tom was confident the law was on our side. Courts don't take kindly to HOAs that flout disability accommodations, especially with evidence this stark. We were gearing up for a fight, not just against Karen, but against the entire system that propped up her cruelty. That night changed everything. What started as a squabble over a backyard shed had spiraled into a battle for survival. Karen had crossed a boundary so far beyond reason, so far beyond decency, that there was no turning back. I'd spent years sidestepping her fines, her snide remarks, her endless rules about things as trivial as a mailbox's shade of beige. But this was war. With the footage secured and the law in motion, I was ready to make her answer for what she'd done. And if the HOA thought they could hide behind their bylaws, shrug off responsibility for their leader's actions, they were in for a brutal wake-up call. This wasn't about a shed or a fine anymore, it was about a father's fight to protect his kid from a monster in a polo shirt and pearls. The absurdity of it still gnaws at me. How does someone justify sneaking around at midnight to sabotage a child's medical device over a neighborhood grudge? It's the kind of plot twist you'd scoff at in a cheap thriller, except the stakes here are as real as the hospital bills piling up. But here's where the story pivots: those cameras, that grainy footage, they're my ace. Karen thought she could slink away, consequence-free, under the cover of darkness. She didn't count on being caught, didn't count on me being the kind of person who doesn't roll over. Every frame of that video is a nail in the coffin of her petty reign, and I'm not stopping until it's sealed shut. Stick around, because this battle is just heating up, and I've got every intention of watching her house of cards collapse under the weight of her own malice. Reflecting on that night, the terror of almost losing Emily still lingers like a shadow. But it's fuel now, driving every step forward. The police are on the case, the lawyers prepping for a showdown, and the neighborhood starting to whisper about what happened. Karen's not just facing me, she's facing a reckoning. And while I wait for the next move, I keep one eye on the hospital updates and the other on that footage, a reminder that no one messes with my family and walks away unscathed. This isn't over, not by a long shot. In court, Karen's arrogance met its match. The small claims courtroom in Austin was a drab affair, with beige walls and flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like a swarm of annoyed bees, but to me, it was an arena of reckoning. It was late spring 2025, just weeks after the harrowing night when Emily nearly slipped away due to a sabotaged ventilator. Sitting beside my lawyer, Tom Reynolds, a grizzled fighter who'd seen his share of suburban skirmishes, I felt a mix of raw nerves and iron resolve. This wasn't just a hearing, it was a stand for my daughter, who was recovering at home with a nurse, still shaken but breathing. Across the room, Karen Mitchell perched ramrod straight, lips pursed as if she'd just sucked on a particularly sour lemon, flanked by a slick attorney who looked like he billed by the smirk. But no amount of legal polish could erase what my cameras had captured in cold, hard pixels. The hearing kicked off with a tense hush, the kind that presses down on you like a physical weight. Tom took the floor with the precision of a surgeon, laying out the stakes: Emily's rare respiratory condition, the ventilator as her unbreakable tether to life, and the night it failed due to deliberate tampering. Then came the moment of truth: the security footage. We played the high-definition video on a courtroom monitor, every frame a silent accusation. There was Karen, skulking onto my property at midnight under the grainy glow of a backyard floodlight, her face as clear as her malice, pouring soda from a can directly into the ventilator's intake port. The room was still, save for the faint whir of the playback, but I could feel the weight of every gaze pinning her down. This wasn't guesswork or hearsay, it was proof, undeniable and unflinching. Security camera evidence like this often holds up in court, especially in vandalism cases, and I knew each second of that video was a brick in the wall of justice we were building. Karen's defense was a masterclass in desperation, almost comical if the stakes weren't so grave. She stood up, her voice quivering with a mix of indignation and panic, stammering, "That's not me." Her lawyer jumped in, spinning a wild yarn about the footage being doctored or that she'd been set up by a vengeful neighbor, me, presumably. But the judge, a stern woman with a gaze that could cut steel, wasn't buying a word of it. Leaning forward, her tone laced with dry wit, she cut through the nonsense. "Ms. Mitchell, your soda stunt is crystal clear on camera." A ripple of stifled chuckles passed through the gallery, and I couldn't suppress a smirk. Karen's face flushed a shade of crimson that rivaled the violation notices she loved to slap on doors. The video didn't lie, neither did the timestamp, the location, nor the can gripped in her hand. She was caught, plain and simple, her excuses crumbling under the weight of high-definition reality. Tom pressed the advantage, his arguments sharp and unrelenting. He didn't just target Karen's act, he went after the system that enabled her. The HOA's negligence, he argued, was as culpable as her actions. They'd failed to rein in their president, ignored repeated harassment over a shed for Emily's medical gear, and allowed a vendetta to escalate into a life-threatening attack. He cited the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and the Federal Fair Housing Act, FFHA, laws that mandate reasonable accommodations for disabled individuals like Emily. The shed, the harassment, and now this sabotage, all of it flew in the face of legal protections. Courts often side against HOAs in disability disputes when evidence is this stark, and we had the footage to back every claim. Tom pushed for damages, legal fees, and accountability, not just for the woman in the video, but for the organization that let her wield unchecked power. The room hung on his words, the gravity of the violation sinking in for everyone except, perhaps, Karen, whose expression flickered between defiance and dread. The judge recessed to deliberate, leaving us in a limbo that felt endless but lasted only about 20 minutes. When she returned, her ruling landed like a thunderclap of vindication. She found in our favor, ordering the HOA to pay $15,000 in damages for emotional distress and medical costs, cover all legal fees, and issue a public apology to me and Emily. Her words for Karen were scathing, calling her actions reprehensible and a direct endangerment to a vulnerable child. While this was a civil case, the judge noted that the criminal charges filed by the police, including federal counts for endangering a disabled person by tampering with medical equipment, were pending in a separate court. Those charges could carry prison time, a reality that seemed to finally pierce Karen's smug armor. Her face, for the first time, showed a crack of genuine fear. Federal charges in extreme cases like this aren't just a threat, they're a plausible hammer, and she was squarely under it now. Leaving the courtroom, Tom clapped me on the shoulder, a rare grin breaking through his usual stoicism. "We got, Mike. This is just the start." He wasn't wrong. The civil win was a hard-fought triumph, a validation of every sleepless night and every ounce of fury that had fueled me since that midnight betrayal. But the battle wasn't over. Karen's federal trial loomed on the horizon, a separate beast with sharper teeth, and I wasn't about to ease up. She'd thought she could bully us, hide behind her HOA crown, and walk away from nearly snuffing out a child's life over some twisted grudge. Today, though, her arrogance buckled under the weight of cold, irrefutable evidence. The neighborhood buzz was already spreading whispers of the footage, the ruling, the downfall of their petty dictator. Her reign of terror teetered on the edge, and I had a feeling the community wasn't done holding her accountable. The absurdity of her defense still lingered in my mind as we stepped into the warm Texas air outside the courthouse. Claiming the footage was fake, as if anyone could fabricate her signature sneer or the deliberate tilt of that soda can. It was almost laughable, a desperate flail from someone who'd never faced real consequences. But there was nothing funny about the stakes, about the memory of Emily gasping for air while a machine meant to save her choked on Karen's spite. This win was a step, a big one, but it was fuel for the fight still ahead. Every dollar of damages, every word of that forced apology, was a brick in a wall of justice I'd keep building until she couldn't hurt anyone again. Reflecting on the judge's words, on the weight of that ruling, I felt a flicker of something like relief, but it was quickly swallowed by determination. The HOA might write their check, Karen might squirm under the glare of federal scrutiny, but this wasn't just about us anymore. It was about every family pushed around by petty tyrants, every vulnerable person dismissed by those who value rules over lives. With the footage secured and the law on our side, I was ready for the next round. Stick around, because this fight for justice has more chapters to unfold, and I've got every intention of seeing Karen's house of cards collapse completely under the weight of her own malice. And just like that, our community stood taller. After the courtroom victory in late spring 2025, the dust began to settle over our suburban Austin neighborhood, but the echoes of Karen Mitchell's actions and her spectacular downfall reverberated through every cul-de-sac. The HOA, reeling from the judge's ruling like a boxer caught with a surprise uppercut, complied with bitter efficiency. They shelled out the $15,000 in damages for emotional distress and medical costs, covered every last cent of the legal fees, and printed a public apology in their newsletter, a stiff, two-paragraph confession that practically dripped with resentment. But the real prize? Karen resigned as president. Residents, sickened by the security footage of her pouring soda into Emily's ventilator, demanded accountability. At the next HOA meeting, they voted her out quicker than you can say, violation notice. A neighbor later teased, Karen's soda scheme fizzled out faster than her HOA reign, and I couldn't help but crack a grin at the poetic justice of it all. The true victory, though, wasn't in the payout or the forced mea culpa. It was in the way our neighbors, once just faces across the street, became a lifeline. After word of the trial and that damning video spread, folks I'd barely exchanged a nod with started showing up at my door. They brought casseroles still warm from the oven, handwritten cards with words of support, and offers to help with Emily's care during her recovery. They were appalled that someone could stoop so low as to endanger a child over a petty grudge, and their outrage turned into action. A group of parents banded together, drafting proposals for inclusive HOA policies to ensure no family with a disabled member would ever face the kind of harassment we endured. For the first time in years, this patch of suburbia felt less like a battlefield littered with rulebooks and more like a genuine community, a place where people had each other's backs. It's a reminder that when a fallen council like the HOA oversteps, especially against a vulnerable kid, people can rally against discriminatory nonsense in powerful ways. To mark Emily's incredible strength and this newfound unity, we decided to host a community art show right in our backyard. At 12 years old, she's not just a fighter against her rare respiratory condition, she's an artist whose paintings of the Texas Hill Country could steal your breath in the best way. We set up easels under the warm spring sun, displaying her landscape's vibrant wildflowers bursting across canvases, rolling hills that seemed to hum with life. Neighbors wandered through, sipping lemonade and marveling at her talent, while she sat near her ventilator, its quiet hum a steady backdrop, beaming with pride as she explained her inspiration to anyone who'd listen. An older woman, clutching one of Emily's smaller pieces she'd just bought, wiped a tear and whispered, "This girl's got more courage in her brushstrokes than most of us have in a lifetime." That day wasn't just about art, it was a celebration of resilience, a quiet defiance against Karen's cruelty, and proof that we'd emerged stronger from the storm. Seeing Emily shine, surrounded by people who cared, was worth more than any courtroom win. Reflecting on this journey, the fight wasn't just about one family's survival, it was about standing up for the vulnerable, for anyone crushed under the weight of petty power trips. Karen thought she could bully us into silence, first with her absurd demands over a shed for medical gear, then with a midnight act of sabotage that nearly cost Emily everything. But with the help of those security cameras, a bulldog of a lawyer named Tom Reynolds, and laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act and Federal Fair Housing Act, we flipped the script. The footage exposed her, the ruling humbled her, and now, as she awaits her federal trial for endangering a disabled person by tampering with medical equipment, her reputation lies in tatters. Once the neighborhood's self-anointed dictator, barking orders over grass height and mailbox hues, she's now the cautionary tale swapped over backyard fences. Whether she faces prison time remains to be seen, but one thing's certain, her days of terrorizing anyone with a clipboard and a sneer are over. The absurdity of her downfall still tickles me in a grim sort of way. A woman so obsessed with control, so convinced of her untouchability, brought low by a can of soda and a few well-placed lenses. It's the kind of irony you'd expect in a dark comedy, except the stakes were real, the fear was raw, and the victory hard-earned. Every dollar of damages, every word of that grudging apology, feels like a brick pulled from the wall of her petty empire. And while the federal trial looms, a separate beast with sharper claws, I'm content for now to watch the community rebuild itself without her shadow. Neighbors who once ducked their heads to avoid her wrath now chat openly at the art show, laugh a little louder, and seem to stand a little straighter. It's a small but profound shift, a reclaiming of space from someone who ruled through fear rather than fairness. Looking out over the backyard that day, with Emily's paintings catching the light and voices mingling in easy conversation, I felt a weight lift, if only for a moment. The past month from the shed dispute to the sabotage, the hospital nights to the courtroom battle had been a gauntlet I wouldn't wish on anyone. But it forged something unbreakable, not just between me and Emily, but among everyone who chose to stand with us. Her ventilator hummed on, a quiet testament to her fight, while her art spoke of a spirit no one could sabotage. Karen's act of malice, meant to break us, instead built something stronger, a network of people who saw injustice and said, "Not here, not now." That's the real win, the one no fine or ruling can quantify. So, here we are, on the other side of a war I never sought but would fight 1,000 times over for Emily. If you loved this story of justice over HOA cruelty, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more tales of triumph. And hey, if you've got your own HOA horror story or a moment when you stood up for someone who needed it, drop it in the comments. I'm eager to hear how you've faced down the Karens of the world, how you've turned betrayal into victory. For now, I'm grateful to see Emily painting again, her brush moving with purpose, while our neighbors smile and linger, no longer under the thumb of petty rules. We've stood taller than the tyranny that once hemmed us in, and that's a canvas worth framing. The road ahead might still hold challenges. Karen's trial could drag on, and HOAs don't change overnight. But with a community at our side and the worst behind us, I'm ready for whatever comes. Emily's laughter, her art, and the memory of that courtroom gavel are reminders of what we've overcome. Karen picked the wrong family to target, and though the fight took everything, it gave back something greater, a neighborhood that finally feels like home. Stick with us through the echoes of this story, because every brushstroke, every shared story in the comments, keeps this spirit of resilience alive.